Hi, and welcome to the Activist class. We've been talking. Shit. Hi, no. Hi, and I think the highest is the one that's freaking me out. Okay, so what's up? Welcome to the Activist class. My name is Myra. I'm here with Chrissy.
Hi.
Spec.
Yo.
Day.
Yeah.
On his phone.
Sorry.
And
Trying
Aretha.
to check if our pizza's here.
Hello.
That's right. The
You're
pizza
swiping
master.
on Instagram.
I wasn't swiping on Instagram.
If you're like Aretha, you're fucking tired of talking about the election. So, we're going to stop talking about the election now. You're welcome.
We started this thing a little over a month and a half ago. We kind of hit the ground running. I don't think any of us has produced a podcast before.
Nope.
And yeah, so it's been a learning experience, and we're super stoked that people are listening and like engaging and sharing and all that good stuff. But there's definitely like things that we want to make better, and also just like feedback that we've gotten from the community about ways to make the show better. And a lot of that feedback is often the same feedback week after week.
Who the fuck are you?
Yeah, exactly. Why is the audio so bad? There's some frequent feedback that we get. I would say the most obvious one is that the audio sounds very DIY, which it is DIY. We're talking to you guys on some $20 karaoke microphones in the living room.
Yeah, give us money.
And
It's pretty much a toaster.
So another piece of feedback that we get a lot is, who are we? Why are we doing this? Where do we come from in terms of, realms of community organizing or issue areas? What animals are you allergic to? What is your zodiac sign?
In your Hogwarts house, your
Hogwarts
Myers-Briggs.
house. So we're here to answer all of your burning questions about why you've been listening to us for 6 episodes.
Myra, are you from Seattle?
No, I'm from Brownsville, Texas.
Bronzeville. Texas is huge. Where is that in relation to the cities the rest of us know?
Yeah.
Well, you know Brownsville now because it's next to Matamoros, which is on the news a lot. That's where all the baby cages are.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, sorry.
shit.
It got grim again. But yeah, no, I'm from Brownsville, where all that's happening.
Grim's okay.
That's okay.
Wait, so all the stuff we're seeing on the news about like throwing kids in cages, that's happening.
That's in my hometown.
What are the overall demographics of where you grew up?
96% Mexican American. So yeah, I didn't really hung out with white people until I moved here.
Same with me.
Actually,
growing up in
really
Hawaii, I had my first real white friend after moving to Seattle. Straight up.
Yeah.
I was spoiled in that way, I think.
Yeah, I was really spoiled too, and how far away I was from whiteness until I moved to Houston, which already is minority majority. So
Most diverse city in the country.
Most diverse city.
Houston.
I fucking love Houston. I will bite off anyone's head that says Austin is better than Houston because Austin is fucking white and Houston is not. It's hella brown.
Yeah, what brought you from the most diverse city in the country to arguably,
Yep.
at least metropolitan, one of the whitest?
Because I did not know how white it was here. I fucking only knew about Seattle from music, and I wanted to get away from my family at the time, and I wanted something new. And after 5 years of architecture, and wanting to do art and wanting to be to a place that didn't feel. I wanted a liberal place that would accept me, truly. And I came here thinking that my crazy ideas weren't so crazy. And fuck, I was so wrong. My crazy environmentalist ideas, my crazy social justice ideas, my crazy...
When did those start?
Late college. I didn't vote until I was 24.
Was there a moment that spurred a lot of that, or was it gradual? for
It
you?
was gradual and then sudden. So I'm from an immigrant town. So yeah, like I was aware of a lot of things, right? But at the same time, I wasn't so critical of, I didn't realize how oppressed we were until I learned more about it in college. One thing no one talks about is that when you come from an immigrant family that is mostly like came from another country and you're like the first roots there, is that when you go to college and they send you to, they really want you to go to college because that's the American dream, right?
Yeah.
So you go to college, you learn all this shit, and then you don't relate with your family anymore because now you're in two different worlds. So I came to Seattle thinking I would be understood more, and then I realized that I'm still in between because the people that understand you aren't doing the work to change how fucked up America is, but then you can't like talk to your family about that stuff too because yeah, they're not going to want to talk to me about Marx.
Seattle's a very educated city where I think we take for granted the type of accessibility people from here have when it comes to even simple things like knowing your rights and like what's progressive. And I just know that, like you mentioned, Myra, that I think every time you get more educated, especially as parents with, you know, my parents are immigrants too, and every time you get more educated, you start to get a little bit more misaligned with family, I think, back home, to the point where you're seeing like well-intentioned white progressive people canceling your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, which is very different from like, I want to make it clear though, it's very different from what I think is the lament of a lot of educated white people complaining about going home to Thanksgiving for a week and like having hard conversations at the dinner table.
Oh my God. That
You know what I
kills
mean?
me.
Like, before we get too far into this conversation, like,
That
there's a
kills
difference
me
there.
every day. But the other thing too is the past 10 years I have had to do heavy re-education because so my boyfriend grew up here, and when we compare high school educations to each other, it's fucking depressing.
Oh yeah, for fucking
His high
sure.
school was better than probably my whole high school combined, and I pretty much had to catch up the first 2 years of college because there's so much that was left out of my education. So actually Texas education radicalized me in how oppressive and one-sided and defunded it is. And in high school, I went to a Catholic high school because I remember I was talking to someone from like Houston and South Texas, like also had like similar trajectory to me. And they were just like, it's kind of fucked up how in Texas, the only way to get better education by comparison, not even like compared to the public schools here, mind you, but you go to one and then it's all religious. So then you get another one side of things because Texas, it infuriates me when people here don't realize how fucking good they have it and then they complain about it.
And just for people who don't know, like, other than architecture, you also do a lot of other type of illustration.
Yeah, I do cartooning now, illustration. I do a lot of just random arts and organizing.
What kind of organizing do you do?
Mostly like educational. So I mostly talk like about right to the city stuff. I've done like I mostly plug into other things. So like I was at the Shell No Protests. Anytime someone like wants to do like something in relation to either homelessness, housing, right to the city, I find a way to involve myself. Yeah.
It's kind of like your main passion.
Mm-hmm. But it all stems from my personal experience of where you can afford to live ties to your fate, essentially, right? Like it ties to your schooling, it ties to whether or not you'll be thrown into jail or whether or not you'll find a good job. If the air you breathe, if it's clean, like
Yep.
Texas, like pretty much all of Texas where there's minorities, that's where all the pollution is. Like down the coast, like border towns up to Houston, but not the good side of Houston where the rich people live. It's where all the poor people live. So like that's what made me an environmentalist, is noticing those discrepancies. And I thought Seattle would know better, but it doesn't.
Well, the story that you share about like moving to Seattle because of this progressive dream of like being a city that is on the right side of most issues, if not all, if you're a progressive person, and coming here and kind of getting hit with the rude awakening of, and there are a lot of benefits to being in Seattle, especially like working in homeless youth shelters. I remember meeting a lot of youth who escaped to Seattle because of a lot of issues in their hometown around like LGBTQ, like BIPOC issues, things like that. And like it is at least on the surface level, a sanctuary. I don't know if you've watched Walking Dead, but it's like kind of like Terminus, it's kind of like,
I need to watch it. That's why I said we should realize how good that we have it.
We do.
But we should be honest in who is receiving that opportunity. And we're not. We keep saying, oh, equal. But the facts are we keep pushing people of color out.
Right.
So be honest about it. We have it good, but for whom?
That's really cool. I think it's dope that we have some nerds on the console. I mean, on the podcast, the Activist Council.
Yeah, I'm a huge nerd.
I think we're all a little nerdy. I mean, that's how one of the first things I noticed about Spec when I started following him on Twitter was that he was like really into comic books and superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
And
wait, is this the comic book couch?
Cool stuff.
Yeah, I think
This is the comic book
It's
couch.
a comic book couch.
Yeah.
I mean, we like comics shit too.
I don't believe
fuckers.
you.
Well, our comics were more like Crayon Shin-chan,
Oh, cute.
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Okay.
Dragon Ball
Yeah.
Z.
Hell yeah.
Hell
We
yeah.
have
Dragon Tales.
Yeah, but nothing like compared to that. Like Myra, Spec, and Chrissy, like they did a lot of. I mean, when I followed Spec, like I just said for the first time, I was like, oh, this guy's into like really dope stuff and cares about real issues. Spec, there's a lot of people who know you as a musician, who
Video editor.
known you as a video guy who trolls right-wing constituents in Seattle,
Super Dad.
do the Lord's work, know you as a dad vlogger,
Mm-hmm.
knows you as a barista,
An angry barista.
angry barista.
Bitter barista.
Bitter
Bitter
Shout out
barista.
to
barista.
angry
Coffee.
baristas though.
Yes. Shout out to Ariel.
But how would you, are all those like very compartmentalized things in your life, or
No, not anymore. I'm just like a content creator, pretty much. Like
influencer?
Yeah.
Influencer to the stars.
I don't see my. I don't know. I feel like I bring a very like different skill set than everybody else in the podcast. Like I have no experience organizing, or like I don't consider what I do activism. But I just like to make stuff.
We definitely
with a
made
point
all
view.
of our videos when we needed shit in the movement. So
I mean, yeah, for sure.
It's true.
But like, I heard Gabriel Teodros put it a really good way that like artists have like a very important part to play in the movement and like documenting and like shaping the narrative. And I've kind of like learned, especially in the last few years, as I've become like more of a professional in all of these ways, like there's a lot of content being created from the other side that is like very well funded, and we don't need that funding to be able to make better content than that, and to be able to like shape our own narrative, and to be able to like just push the agendas basically that we want to do in creative ways that like make the grow the tent, so to speak.
We do need that funding for some jobs though. But yeah.
Give
Well,
us
yeah.
some money.
I totally
Shake
hear
the
what you're saying.
Venmo.
But like we don't, like our success is not contingent. Their success is contingent on that money because they need to hire people like me to make their stuff dope.
Right.
But like we can also just make that dope shit like for ourselves.
It's
And,
true.
like, but that's kind of like how I see my role in this. I'm not like an activist or an organizer, but I am just like a documentarian and like content creator and storyteller. I
producer to the stars.
But here's the thing though. It's like you're very online. You're very front facing. Your avatar is a cartoon, but it's of you. You know, it's speculation. People know your full name online, and that has to come with a toll on your family. And I'm specifically talking about, dude, your house got busted down by the CIA. You know what I mean? Like, you're online all the time. You're being harassed by right-wing groups. Like, and you took a break, couple days, which is about 9 years in Twitter world.
Right.
Pretty much.
It really is. Like, I don't know about you, but there for me, there's definitely times where I'm like, maybe I should like really just get off the grid. And I don't even have I don't have kids or anything, you know? How do you balance that?
For a lot of years, I found myself like in very safe, like I'm the most like privileged person. Like I like hit all the fucking marks, right? So like there's nothing the internet can do to me, and like that's not like a fucking challenge or anything, but like
Don't come for spec, I'll kill you.
Like I mean, and
Me
like
too.
and so like my wife definitely is like, hey, like I'm not invincible, so like, and neither are kids, and so like that makes sense. But like I feel like I need to do something with this, and so like I can't, like I wouldn't like take myself out of that situation, really, if that makes sense. I don't know.
What's been your biggest lesson working with communities of color as a cishet white dude?
I mean, I think it's just to like always stay skeptical of whether or not you need to be there in the first place. I just like try not to take up a lot of space, and like try not, I don't know. I feel like if there's a particular way that my skill set can help, like there are like passive ways that I can offer that, and like make that available, and like be willing to do labor to like make that happen. But mostly just like ask yourself if you really need to be there.
I was gonna
like
say
all the time, like every 5 minutes or so, just check in and be like,
it sounds
Ask for the
exhausting.
enthusiastic yes. It always goes back to that.
right, yeah, totally.
Is that your advice to other white folks who want to be in solidarity? Or what would that be? Like, if you could make little fortune cookies for them, what would they say?
I mean, probably just that, like, do you need to be here, and like why, and like why do you want to be in solidarity? Like, is it performative? And if it is, like, who are you performing that for? I don't know. Just like be uncomfortable, like stay uncomfortable, be willing to take feedback, and like, I don't know, understand that you have something to like offer, but that's what it is. Like, it's an offer. It's not like, this is not something you should be leading, and it's not something that you should like be pushing on other people.
Sounds like you found your role, and it's exactly where you're passionate in your work. So it's good.
Yeah, I got real lucky.
It's beautiful.
Our next person is the true evergreen of the activist class.
She literally went to Evergreen.
That's what that means.
I did.
She wasn't talking about her tree.
Shimizu.
Hi.
We have two people technically with Seattle roots, and that's Aretha and Christina. And Christina is someone who's always lived in Seattle.
No, I haven't.
That's true. You've lived in many other places.
No, I grew up in Edmonds.
So you grew up in Shoreline.
No, I grew up in Edmonds.
Oh.
Ooh.
And I feel very comfortable talking about that experience. I think it's relevant.
Which is different from Jay Park, because he's not as comfortable talking about his Edmonds experience.
Dude, Edmonds
Jay Park?
radicalized me. That's
Yeah,
the
let's talk
question.
about that.
It politicized me.
40 minutes north of Seattle. That's where you're born and raised.
And it's on the Puget Sound.
Is
It's
it like
on
a
the water. There's a ferry.
suburbia?
Oh, beautiful.
There's a ferry dock.
What did you do
goes to
for fun
Kingston.
in the burbs?
Well, all of my friends had cars in high school, and so we would smoke weed and drive around.
And ghost ride the whip.
Yeah. We would have routes. We'd take the routes, you know.
Ooh, okay.
And then
okay.
we'd also
What is routes?
the smoking route.
Oh. that's not what
And
we call it.
you guys didn't have the routes.
I had the routes.
I have a complicated relationship with Edmonds. I grew up in Edmonds, and I went to a private Christian school in the North End called King's, and I wasn't taught evolution in school. And I also had chapel every Friday. And I went to school with a bunch of really rich kids. And I was one of 3 other Asian kids in my grade. And I was the only biracial kid in my grade. I think there was one student who was black until the 5th grade when there was 2. And I was actually thinking about, like, I am in my 30s and I've had a lot of therapy and a lot of time to process what my upbringing means to me. And I think, like, going to a Christian school and being raised religious was really foundational for me. It was something that did a lot of good and was also something that was harmful. And I remember, like, these thermometers in our classrooms in elementary school where we were raising money for missions trips to build houses in Mexico and do other missionary type shit, colonial charity work. And that, I think, made me realize at a young age that people around the world had much less than what I had. But I also kind of remember thinking, like, oh, I wish my parents could give more. Like, why aren't my parents writing checks to, like, build the houses? And it was a competition in my classroom. Like, the piety of the religion was really built around, like, classism as well as white supremacy. And so I experienced a lot of, like, self-loathing and shame growing up in Edmonds that I had to unpack later in my life. And so a lot of what radicalized me, I think, was having identity angst and, like, needing to, like, go through the process of, like, identity formation from, like, wanting to assimilate and, like, push away from my roots, which I grew to become very ashamed of, to realizing that healing and liberation looked like reclaiming those roots and, like, forgiving myself for how mean I was to my dad, you know, and, like, how mean I was to myself, and also, like, how messy I was with my community, and, like, finding, you know, POC community and kind of, like, being half white and, like, biracial, going through the process of kind of decolonizing my identity and myself was messy and strenuous on, like, those who, like, were very compassionate and loving towards me in that process.
So then how did you end up in Seattle proper?
I did go to Evergreen.
Hell yeah, you did.
And while I was in Evergreen, I studied political economy. And that was a whole nother thing, right? Like, I think finally my education gave me a set of tools and language to understand institutional and structural inequality. And, like, it gave me everything that I was looking for that I felt angst around at Edmonds, you know. But I was also reading books and philosophy and political science that was all written by white men, you know, like David Harvey, for instance. And when I was in high school, I, like, read Noam Chomsky, you know, Hegemony or Survival, and like Henri Lefebvre. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Am I saying that right?
It's close.
Yeah. So basically, like, I was at Evergreen with a bunch of white dudes who were pretty much, like, socialist alternative bros, and then feeling kind of, like, closer to what I was looking for, but still very much in a silo, and, like, hadn't yet connected with my own trauma, I think, and, like, hadn't connected with my own identity. And so after I graduated, I did a bit of traveling, but then I moved back to Seattle, and I did AmeriCorps, and I actually really have to give credit to this program. It was like, I wasn't, like, a city year person or anything, but, like, in my AmeriCorps program, it was through Solid Ground, and, like, we had to do anti-racism work. It was, like, part of that process. So we did really intentional, like, I've, like, done People's Institute for Survival and Beyond like
Yes.
2 or 3 times, and like and then like we did a lot of like race-based caucusing and connecting with like our personal stories, and unpacking like how we all have internalized racism, and not just institutional and structural racism, but the real personal deep shit. And so I think in a lot of ways, like that was the first time that I didn't come at understanding the world around me from a really like theoretical headspace that was detached from my own personal accountability. I was able to come at it with my heart and with an understanding of like the messages that I grew up with in my family, and from my mom and my dad and their parents. And yeah, I came back for AmeriCorps of all fucking things, was at Solid Ground, an anti-poverty organization that tries to do anti-racism work, but with brilliant people who kept trying and failing and trying and failing. Not the people of color. The people of color were brilliant. And the institution itself just kept trying and failing and trying and failing, but learned so much through the trying and so much through the failing.
Something that I really admire about you is the way in which you talk about both like philanthropy work, but just about how money affects movement work. And now knowing your evergreen background and like this political econ lens, could you talk a little bit about like did that inform it? How does it inform it? Like, you know, like all of the things that you've lived through and all of that like work that you've done. Because the way you talk about it, it makes sense. Like for the first time, philanthropy has made sense to me. Like becoming friends with you, I know what it is now, like, and how it works, and you know, like both the critique of it and also the ways in which it does do good work, I guess. I talked in a circle in my head.
No, it's cool. I ended up in fundraising of all places, because the program that I applied to be the program coordinator for, and I was really excited to do direct service, got defunded by the state. And so instead of leaving Solid Ground, my first mentor there hired me to do an annual giving fundraising position, and said that she would teach me how to do it, because I had some political campaign work and like some political fundraising experience at the time, and also grew up in Edmonds around a bunch of fucking rich people and could code switch and kind of navigate. And so she was like, you'll be good at this. And I was like, I'm really wanting to understand how nonprofits fit within this larger public and private structure, and like what is going on at the top, what those tables look like, what the conversations look like around decision making, and how things get funded, right? So I was like, I guess I'll do this weird ass job. And so I started doing it, and I was fascinated in learning, you know, how wealthy people stay wealthy through philanthropy, because it gives them major tax breaks. They're also able to like stay in control of what money gets allocated where. And a lot of like the energy that's spent in organizations is so performative to like pleasing funders, as opposed to like doing important work in communities, that a lot gets taken away actually from like communities being able to like do good work and to innovate, because it's so metric driven, and it's so driven by like meeting the expectations of funders instead of being able to like really innovate and take risks, or as Amazon would say, like fail fast. Like the nonprofit sector is starved from the ability to innovate in the same way the private sector is. And in addition to that, there's just like little things every day that cause harm to people in that type of work, you know, like poverty porn, for instance, and like reinforcing the savior like mentality that some like wealthy donors will have, that like they know what's right for the community, or that they are giving to help some like poor brown kid who's like homeless, and that by doing that they can feel less guilty about how they made their money to begin with, or who they are, or their lives, right? As opposed to just reframing that narrative and saying, you don't get a gold star, you're not a savior. Like there's something like genuinely inequitable, historically inequitable, about how you've been able to amass wealth. And like the conversation needs to be less about generational poverty and why families are poor, and switched to talk about generational wealth and why families are rich.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's what I was trying to get at. Genius.
exactly.
So, Dashik,
Yes.
Okay,
Go
so
fuck English
you
around me.
Deflect,
ordered a
bitch.
pizza earlier and used a fake name to order a pizza.
David.
Okay, I wasn't gonna spill all
It's
the
David.
tea.
It's my Jamba. I call it my Jamba Juice name.
Okay, so
It's my name when they're like, name for your order, because I know they're gonna fucking yell it out. And no, I don't trust Jamba Juice workers, if you were wondering if they're gonna butcher my name or not. So I say David or Harry. I went for a
Harry.
long time because I liked Harry Potter. White gummy extra large for David.
What is the white gummy?
Secret menu benches.
okay, but the point of that was that you said that you worked at Pagliacci's and you rage quit, and
Rage
I need
quit.
context.
That's how I
for
got
that story.
radicalized. That's my fifth wave radicalization.
Okay.
It's like Cell's second to the last final
Tell
form
us
in
in.
Dragon Ball
I
Z.
need,
Bring us in,
I need
yeah.
the story.
So working at Pagliacci's part-time, delivering pizza while working on Nikita Oliver's campaign.
Who dat?
Because I had to make money.
Mhm.
You know, this is an expensive-ass city.
Mhm.
And
The People's
Nikita's,
Party didn't have any money.
Nikita's campaign paid equitably, but not enough, not to their fault, to survive in this city.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about growing up in Hawaii?
Wow.
Growing up in Hawaii,
Yeah, because, man, it's a soft episode.
Get soft.
he's not gonna get soft.
Get
Look at him.
soft, motherfucker.
what do you
You've
mean?
got your Korean joke shield up.
Korean joke shield.
Yeah, you're like deflect.
It's like a Yu-Gi-Oh card.
I'm not deflecting. I grew up in Hawaii. My parents were immigrants. My dad is black and Korean, and my mom's Korean. You ask, how did they grow up in Korea if your dad's black and Korean? He was a war baby, but grew up with his Korean mom. He was born right after, during the end of the Korean War. Dad was a 19-year-old black soldier from Atlanta. Mom was a Korean woman living near the military base. They met, had a thing, made love in the tall grass.
In the tall grass?
Wait, really?
In the tall grass. I'm just hoping
So
it was tall
uncomfortable.
grass. I'm hoping it was tall
Not
grass.
short grass.
Pokemon?
And not like,
Crabgrass?
yeah, it's like long enough where Pokemon can hide. Yeah, my dad was born. Grandma decided to keep him. Went through a lot of racism. America's not the only racist country that suffers from white supremacy. And he immigrated to America in his late 20s, ironically, to try and escape racism. And came to America for that because he grew up going to the community center where Ollie was fighting boxing matches and thought, man, if that man can make it, maybe I can make it. And so he kind of stuck that in his mind, bounced around different states for a while, and then he ended up in Hawaii because it was probably at least culturally accepting of somebody with a pretty big ambiguous story like his. Everybody has pretty ambiguous stories in Hawaii. How you ended up there, mixed with different things. My mom, more of a traditional Korean immigrant, but grew up pretty poor. Grew up on a farm. Dad died real young, so she was the oldest sibling. In Korean culture, oldest siblings usually take on like the more parental role in general, especially growing up from a teenager without a father. She kind of assumed that role. So there's like a lot of like survival instinct in my parents. And those of us who have immigrant parents, and I think 4 of us do here out of 5.
Super majority.
Super majority. Yup.
Used to be the council.
Yeah. Those of us who grew up with immigrant parents, which is 4 of us here, know that what they are fluent in is survival, and part of that is hoping for their kids to never have to survive, which also means us being radicalized and continuing the fight that they had no choice but to embark in is not always the preferred ideology our parents would want for us. And I'll speak for myself. I think my mom would rather have me not go to protest and write really radical things, because why? And I learned this at
Why
a
would
later
you put
age.
attention to yourself?
Why
That's
would you
some-
put attention to yourself? And also, like, why would you put yourself in that situation more by choice when I literally tried my best for you to not be in that type of
Exactly.
situation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think I grew up pretty resentful of my parents because of like their apoliticalness, even though like we grew up in Section 8 housing, government funded housing, pretty poor, not a lot of access to resources. And so you think like, what the, like, you would know the fight is necessary, but like, you know, part of it being culturally Asian, part of it being like, I had to suffer through that so you don't have to deal with that. Like, just go to school.
Yeah.
Like Myra mentioned, just like get an education, become a doctor, lawyer, and that's a stereotype. We make jokes about it now, but really like in their frame of mind, like just make money. And I always like joke with my friends. It's like, yeah, my parents wanted me to become a lawyer, a doctor. They're Korean, but it's also, if I got another job that made just as much money, they'd be cool with it. You know what I mean? Like that's just like what they thought made the money in America.
Actually, I'm really curious what everyone's like top career that your parents told you, like what's like their ideal, you know, like what's like you made it, right? You fucking made it to the top. To me, it was engineer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mine's was
I didn't get like doctor, lawyer, or anything. It was like engineer.
You're gonna laugh at this, but mine's was probably politician.
Same.
Wow.
Same.
Oh my god.
My family made like presidential posters for me when I was like
See?
in
That's
elementary school.
fucking-
Oh my
My
God.
parents didn't go that
Oh.
far. They didn't have that high hopes.
I mean, it was a picture of me at the beach covered in dirt, being like President Basu at the beach.
Yeah. My mom just knew I love like arguing, debating. They said lawyer a lot. They're like, oh, you'd be
That's
so
so
good at
cool.
arguing. But then she's also like, oh, you're always like talking to someone and you're so like social as I got older. So she's like, oh, you should like stay out of trouble so you can like become the mayor. At that time, Big Island, one of the islands, elected their first Korean American mayor, Harry Kim.
Oh wow!
And so I think that kind of like inspired a lot of these. If one Korean can do it, we all can do it, you know? So pioneers of industries for communities are definitely a big deal because you definitely open up the possibility of what somebody can do.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. And I'd see it all the time too, right? Like my parents would not be interested in anything like remote about the Olympics or like random shit like that. But whenever there'd be like a Mexican or Mexican American
Right.
up there, like they'd be like, "Oh, we won the Taekwondo." I'm like, "What the fuck? Taekwondo? We got gold in Taekwondo?" Yeah, we fucking did. So like, I just like, yeah, it's.
So I didn't grow up religious like Chrissy did, but I found a church I started going to through a friend invite in high school, and that's kind of where I got radicalized too. Like I started seeing like the difference between charity and justice during that time, and being in the church and knowing that I was one of the few kids that came from like not the wealthiest background. I mean, there were other kids too in the church like that, but I know myself, I didn't. And I remember I would ask like my youth pastor, like, hey, like, here's a thought. Like, instead of going once a month to downtown to do soup kitchens, why don't we try to get 2 homeless people a job? And I just like at that time, I didn't realize what I was processing, but I was just like trying to figure out like,
How do you help people?
yeah, like I
Yeah.
don't think they want to be homeless.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
we spend a shit ton of money like doing these soup kitchens, and like I just remember like walking up to somebody during one of these events and I asked them like, hey, like, do you want some soup? And then this individual was like, no thanks. And I remember thinking like, what? in my head, my naive, arrogant head, I was like, dude, you're homeless. Like, why are you rejecting my food? So I was like, are you sure? Like, you're not hungry? He's like, no, man, I'm way too hungry to eat. And I remember, like, I was like, damn, like, what kind of hunger is that? You know? And I remember thinking, like, I was like, okay, cool. Like, can I pray for you then? Because that's what you did. You know, you give them food just so you got a gateway to pray. So you can save them from hell. And so I remember, like, I prayed for it. I was like, I asked him to pray. He said, nah, I'm good. And I was like, what? Not even a free prayer? And then he was like, yeah, I mean, I know you're just going to say, like, Jesus loves me. But, like, does he really love me? Because if there was a Jesus that loved me, like, why would I still be homeless? And I remember kind of thinking, like, damn, what are we doing as a church during that time youth group to, like, find an end to this problem and really, like, show that at that time, at least, Jesus or God really did care about them. And again, at that time, I didn't know I was wrestling between concepts of charity and concepts of justice. But I think that's what started getting my brain turning of, like, there's a facade that often comes out of well-intentioned people who are doing things because they know it's the morally, ethically right thing to do versus, like, investing real resources into finding solutions to a problem.
I mean, you saw the difference there, right? And it's the difference is that charity continues the same power structures, whereas justice distributes that power.
Yeah.
Or topples it on its head.
Definitely.
Right?
But I do also want to mention, I haven't been to church in years. I moved to Seattle, went to seminary for a year. It's another podcast in another country in another month. It's not this one. But one of the things that annoys me about Seattle is this, like this hyper secularism of, like, elitism, you know, of, like, if you are somewhat religious, you are less than in terms of intellect, which means X, Y, and Z, and not realizing that a lot of liberation movements in the past have been based around foundations of religion. So yeah, I mean,
white church is really different than black and brown church.
Very true, very true. Yeah. I did work at a white church once, and we sang the Beatles during Christmas service. Fucking blew my mind.
Dude, Wonderwall.
It blew my fucking mind. I mean, there's some Beatles music that's, like, you can, like, tie the lyrics into some, like, spiritualism. But we also did Hey Jude. But we also sang Hey Jude. We couldn't even change it to, like, Hey Jesus. Anyway, I got radicalized in that way of seeing the stark difference between charity and justice and what the church was super willing to do like 1 day soup kitchens, like quick fixes, maybe open up a shelter here and there. And it was a pretty clear, there are a lot of clear parallels to what I currently now critique the city of doing and neoliberals. The church,
a whole other episode.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the church very much is similar when it comes to ideology as the liberal progressive movement here in Seattle, and our willingness to do really quick temporary bandages on a large socio-economical racial problem, but not willing to do permanent solutions like build affordable housing, invest in public education in black and brown neighborhoods, tax the rich. So I freelance, I write, do political work sometimes, and I work at Cut, which is where I make or help make some viral video content about basically social experiments around types of relationships, and I try to help my friends go very viral. That's like a secret agenda, and Aretha's been in a couple of videos.
Hell yeah.
With her brother and on some blind dates.
I'm still single.
Blind dates?
Aretha went on a blind date on Cut.
I'm still
I
single.
heard it's, yeah. Well, you're
Whole
single
conversation
because
there.
you're working all the time.
That's not true.
You're in the political world. Would you even want to date a political person?
Yeah, I would be down.
You don't feel like that's like shitting where you eat, as people would say, boomers?
Boomers.
I feel like this doesn't sound like I'm in the mafia or some shit, but like You need someone who like understands the life.
You're a Capricorn. You just want a power couple.
That's so true. She's not just
so
a Capricorn.
true.
You're like a triple cap, right?
So Aretha, activist from the age of 14.
Shut the fuck up.
Wait, is that true?
People,
No.
when people talk about Aretha in the city, they're always like, yeah, Aretha when she's like a little young teenager standing up at the council stand. I'm like, I'm pretty sure she was like an adult.
I was 18.
Oh,
Does that count?
pretty
Yeah.
young.
Yeah, it's young.
It's a young
Started
person.
organizing when I was 18.
That's
But
so
everyone
funny.
thinks I'm 12, so I might as well be 5 when I started.
But you were like, where was social media at when you were 18?
Oh, yeah.
Was Twitter wasn't what Twitter is right now.
No, it was because Black Lives Matter is the movement that.
What year were you 18?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's the thing. She was 18
I was
6 years ago.
It was 2014.
Oh, okay. Well, Ferguson was 2014.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So right, it was like right around the time Twitter hashtag Black Lives Matter started.
Yeah.
Totally. Oh man, you
you fucking got all the experience.
Oh,
came
hell
into
yeah.
age right
Yeah,
when
of
hashtag
that.
activism was really becoming a thing.
I mean, like we
Mobilization.
got catalyzed through Twitter. We used Facebook heavily to like do all of our like protests and stuff like that. We had an Instagram, but I was a MySpace kid.
You had a top 8.
Hell yeah,
How often you changed it?
bro. That was like a very contentious part of my
Yeah.
teen life.
I do
was
want to.
my MySpace.
I did text my friend once saying, "Hey, I noticed I'm not on your top 8 anymore. Did I do something wrong?"
No, it's real. That was so real.
You were sensitive.
I sent that text.
I was more of a
did.
Sensitive.
live journal kid. So
Yeah.
I didn't
Are you
Zanga.
still on
Do that
Facebook, Aretha?
I am still on Facebook. I don't use it like actively. I only use it for like very big announcements, and like most 90% of it is events.
You're waiting for that relationship status change post.
This one day,
That's gonna get you at least 300.
it's just gonna be like my mom liking it and unliking it and liking it again. Just like
Really?
finally.
Okay, so you became an adult, a legal adult, 18 when Ferguson was happening, 2014, big year for activism, and your first organizing group was the Seattle chapter of Black Lives Matter?
No, so at that time, like Seattle BLM we didn't have an actual chapter. It was my group, which was Women of Color for Systemic Change, and Outside Agitators, which were the like original OG like BLM groups. And so our group, Walk FSC, shout out to the OGs. It was myself, Harmony, Jasmine, and Zem. 3 of those people I went to high school with. One of them I met at a Black Friday protest.
Cheetahs.
No, I definitely tried to make us. Our name was going to be the 3 Black Panthers and the Bengal Tiger, but I got voted down
Good.
very heavily, and
That's
everyone was
definitely
like,
an Aretha
"Shut-"
joke.
But Women of Color for Systemic Change was still long as fuck.
Yeah.
But everyone was out here saying Walk FSC like it was.
Should have went with cheetahs.
Yeah.
Yo, we was out here. We were Seattle Mag, all of the things.
Oh, you got a Seattle Mag Award? Shit. Get the fuck out of here, Palumbo. We got the original political activism. So you started doing Women of Color for Systemic Change, which one of the main issues was centered around
It was around like police accountability,
youth jail,
and just like youth work in general. I mean, the funny thing was like we had just graduated from Garfield, and so like our first protest started at Garfield, and everyone thought that we were still at Garfield, and we were like, no, we are in college now.
You the Bothell, right? Which is arguably one of the more
Shout
radical
out B-Town
universities, and from what I heard,
oh fuck yeah, Bothell is.
I mean, second to Evergreen, Chrissy.
yes,
Don't worry.
Yes, yeah, Uta Bothell is a
sweet
gem,
place.
man.
What was it like to navigate organizing as a young person with the adults in Seattle?
People were really kind to us. People were really, really kind to us. A lot of people thought we were cute. We were cute, but I would say for organizers who were older than us, I mean, like, that's when I met Nikita, and they were definitely like big sisters to us. Like, they would look out for us at protests, would often just like yank us by the collar when we were like getting a little too frisky on the front lines. But I never felt like it was like paternalistic. It was, after, I would say the height of Seattle Black Lives Matter was 2015 into 2016. And then once we started kind of rolling more into internal work, then there was more of the, like the sit downs with the elders and some of the cultural differences we had as organizers, right? Like their style of organizing was very different from what we were doing at the time. And they definitely had opinions about it. So yeah, I think that was it, but I feel like that's the classic narrative around intergenerational organizing in general.
How long did it take for you to stand up on the City Hall table and yell at Bruce Harrell?
I never yelled at Bruce Harrell.
Yeah, you did. I'm trying to find the picture right now. But
I didn't yell at Bruce Harrell. Also, there's no tables to stand on.
I think you have the most pics I know holding a megaphone. You're a megaphone Aretha.
Oh,
Yeah.
Like, that noise is...
My job within Walk FSC was I wanted to make sure like Black women were leading, like they had the mics, and my job was to keep the block together. So like I'd make sure the back of the protest wasn't too slow and the front of the protest wasn't too fast. So there are so many stories of people who like didn't know me at the time. They were like, there was just this Indian girl sprinting up and down city blocks.
Oh, I remember seeing you.
fucking cool.
Yeah, like
I
you
remember
would just
seeing like I keep seeing this person running when I used to go to those protests in
Yeah.
like 2015.
it was just like my hair, and like my auntie, who's also an OG, she was like, you need to have like a brand of like how you dress. And so she was like, you have to wear all black and a colorful scarf. And so that's why you see me in all those pictures. I'm wearing like all black and like a red scarf or like an orange scarf. Because my auntie would always be like, that's what you have to wear.
So how was that transition going from protesting and yelling in City Hall to now working in City Hall for a radical council member? But I'm sure, I don't know how did you feel like even like the first day of work when you're like, this is like where I work now?
It's hard. It's still really hard. And I've been there for 2 years now. I mean, I talk about this very openly, like whenever people are like, come talk to the youths about being in council. I'm always like, this shit is an identity crisis constantly. Because I do. Every time I walk up to Teresa to give her something on the dais, I'm like, I was literally standing there, like, what was it, 2016? Yeah, Block the Bunker was 2016. Like, scattering flower petals as like, and creating an altar in chambers. So I think about it a lot. And I talk to Teresa about it a lot because she also comes from organizing. And we both sometimes kind of feel that, like, weird squishiness, and it's hard to, I think initially when I first started working at council, coming back to, because I didn't stop organizing, right? Like I was like, I need to keep my soul, I don't want to lose who I am. Like I definitely, like, I'm gonna be honest, like I overcompensated a lot. Like I tried to prove that I was still radical, and I tried to prove that I was still with the shit and still down and like still the same old Aretha. And
When you started working in City Hall.
Like I would work a full day and then I would try and just like stack meetings, and like I wasn't sleeping because I like really wanted to prove that I wasn't gonna sell out. And that just led to a lot of burnout, and it forced me to have very honest and brutal conversations with people that I had been in the streets with for years, to be like, I'm scared that you're gonna stop being my friend, or I'm scared that you're going to see me differently now that I'm here. But I had role models like Sarah Tacola, who worked in Councilmember O'Brien's office, was, like a fucking radical ass organizer. Like Sarah was always at the front lines, like doing shit. And so it gave me hope that like it had been done before. Like someone had remained an organizer and was in council and like was still accountable, and like people didn't, like she didn't lose all her friends. But it's still hard because, I definitely feel the weight of where I sit and who I work for. And I know that everything that my boss does has a very, it literally affects the material conditions of people. And it's really scary because everything we do is like directly impacts somebody, like whether it's their light bill or their housing or like something like that.
So you started feeling a little more that like you're not necessarily selling out, you're just achieving the end goals through a different means.
Can you like point to specific ways you bring your experience as an organizer into your work as an LA?
I think one of the most tangible ways that I've been able to use that is a lot of people in City Hall, you know, they're policy wonks. Their whole life is in the details. It's in the density. It's like in the dense details, sorry. And, you know, when we're drafting talking points or we're figuring out like how are we going to communicate this to the public, most people will pivot to talking about it in like granular detail and like this is the specific zoning, blah, blah, blah. And usually what I'm saying in those rooms, also as the youngest person in those rooms, is this is not going to land with community. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be accessible. Like people that and I always say, like people that I grew up with don't know what the fuck this means. And so being able to always push us to talk in normal people terms and force us to be normal people and not just policy wonks all the time. Mm-hmm. I think that it causes people to slow down a little bit and not just think of everything as a campaign, but to think of it, you know, in the way that policy, what it's supposed to do, which is to benefit people, which is why, you know, Councilmember Mosqueda has the brand that she does, is because we really try and do that.
So. And you come in with lived experience.
Yeah.
Growing up in the CD.
Yes. And you know, when I first started working for Teresa, she jokes about this now, but like, I think I was a NIMBY. Like, that is my confession, is I really think I was a NIMBY when I first started working with her. Because, you know, I grew up in the Central District when it was a black and brown neighborhood, right? Like, we talk about it as if it was this far off thing, but that was 2012 when my dad died. Mm-hmm. And so we know everyone's talked about like the point when they feel radicalized, and usually what I say is Tamir Rice, but thinking more deeply, I think it was when I started seeing people that I had grown up with having to move out because management shifted, or like my dad was a single father. He would come home and he'd have these checks and he was like, well, fuck, they raised our rent again. And, you know, like he was a property manager of some weird university village thing. And I think those things started to make me feel like that's when I first remember questioning, like, why is it that like our block can get shot up and no one cares? Or like, you know, there's one washing machine for over 30 families. And starting to feel those things and then literally see my neighborhood be just completely, you know, pushed out. Like everyone I grew up with is gone. And the CD doesn't look the same. And so when I first started working for Councilmember Mosqueda, I didn't like row housing. I didn't like the idea of density because I was like, look what it's done to my community. Like people's aunties' houses that I knew have gotten torn down, and now there's these row houses, and we call them cracker boxes. And growing up, we would be like,
they're so ugly.
Yeah, they are ugly. I'd be like, fuck those Lego boxes. And now I'm meeting her in the middle and like understanding that those are actually now tools to make things affordable. It helps me like, you know, when you were talking, Chrissy, about how Evergreen gave you the language to talk about the things that you would live through. I feel like now not living in City Hall.
Oh, you are overworked.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, especially during the fucking budget process.
Right.
Yeah. We don't leave that place.
It must feel like that.
I get it more. Like, I understand. It's hard because, like, when you work there, you know everything. So even when I show up to community meetings and, like, people say something that's, like, factually incorrect, I'm like, well, I mean, not to be the voice of the government here, but actually it's, like, these 5 things. And then I, like, question myself because I'm like, am I speaking for the man? What am I doing?
What people don't know is that Aretha actually, not only is she a badass activist, organizer, legislative aide, future mayor,
President.
future president. Sorry.
I do not want any of those jobs, y'all.
Aretha
Not that I
actually
couldn't do
wants to
it.
be a Hollywood star.
Hell yeah!
Aretha is all about, this is just her side hustle. Her real hustle is like, she's activist class's influencer.
Yeah.
To be influencer.
Next week on Activist Class, a Black Friday special with
The one, the only Red Witch of the socialist movement, aka Auntie Shama,
aka Malasandra, aka Leeches on your Might as well double
Air horn?
down.